I'm Allison Jonjak, the Cranberry Outreach Specialist with the University of Wisconsin-Madison Division of Extension. These videos are the on-demand recordings of UW Extension and the Wisconsin State Cranberry Growers Association's virtual brown bag lunch series. These monthly sessions offer growers and researchers a way to share timely and relevant information. We hope you'll enjoy and continue to engage with us.
Hi, everyone. My name is Grant Holly. I'm the Executive Director of the Wisconsin State Cranberry Growers Association. We are very happy to be able to partner with UW Extension to bring you the research needed to be able to navigate our ever-changing environment. I'd like to thank all of our speakers today for their valuable time and leadership, the growers for joining us, and Allison for being the catalyst from which all of these sessions rely. Thank you so much.
And want to give a big thank you to Sandeep and to Cesar and to Amaya, who'll be joining us as well, for being willing to present with us in this, our November kind of nationwide roundup virtual brown bag lunch. As in case there's anyone joining us for the first time, we do have these every month that isn't harvest and that Wisconsin doesn't have an in-person outreach event. So we're glad to get to take specifically the November and December sessions to catch up on new research that's gone on through the year, especially things that have happened outside of the state of Wisconsin, and make sure that everyone is up to date on the cool new things that are happening. To that end, today we're going to have Cesar Rodriguez Sauna from Rutgers is going to present some new kind of up-to-date information on the blunt-nosed leafhopper. They've been doing more work in the past couple of years and going to make sure that we have everything as up-to-date as possible on that. Sandeep Bhatti is at UMass and is a postdoc research associate there, and he's been doing some pretty exciting work on frost modeling and has some spring data to share with us. And then our Amaya Atucha of University of Wisconsin-Madison is going to present in the topics of color, especially just before harvest and even after fruit has come off the vine. A couple of housekeeping notes. We have closed captions on. If you prefer to see those, you can choose ... and view closed captions. I have the chat on. We really love to have people ask questions over the course of the event. So if you have a question, you can either unmute yourself and ask it, or you can ask in the chat. You can also use to Allison and ask a question directly to me. And if you do that, I will ask that question anonymously on your behalf. And with that housekeeping out of the way, I think we are good to see if we've got a representative from the Wisconsin State Cranberry Growers Association to give us a welcome, but I don't, if you are here, anyone, go ahead and unmute yourself and say welcome, but I just want to thank, I am the Cranberry Outreach Specialist with the University of Wisconsin-Madison Division of Extension, and I get a lot of guidance from the Professional Development Committee of the Wisconsin State Growers Association in terms of getting suggestions for who should speak at these. So always appreciate feedback and make sure we're talking about the most relevant things. Thank you, Sandeep, so much for being willing to present this. I've heard a lot of good things from the growers, and I know we're loving new frost information. So thank you.
Thank you, Allison. First of all, I'm grateful for the opportunity, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sandeep, and I work at the UMass Cranberry Station. I'm just grateful to be, doing this research in Wisconsin, which involves spring frost forecasting for cranberry marshes using artificial intelligence. My team includes Dr. Peter Jernyama, Dr. Casey Kennedy, and Dr. Juan Zalapa. Dr. Jernyama is here at UMass Cranberry Station. Drs. Kennedy and Zalapa are with the USDA ARS. Let's see. Okay. So before we dive into the data, let's talk. I just wanted to briefly mention acknowledgements. I wanted to acknowledge our funding sources, USDA ARS, and especially Wisconsin Cranberry Board. Their commitment to spring frost forecasting made this project, possible, and really their partnership has been really valuable to us. Our grower advisors, Robert and John, have been really valuable to coordinate with our industry partners and stakeholders to deploy the sensors in this project. And finally, the support from industry Horto for the in-kind donation of sensors, Cranberry Growers Association in Wisconsin, and finally the University of Massachusetts Cranberry Station, where we are analyzing all the data and compiling the results. So most of you know here, spring frost protection is essential for optimal cranberry bud development, right? If there was no protection, growers will incur significant economic losses in terms of cranberry yield. Marshes in specific presents very unique challenges given the complex microclimate. So frost forecasting is very unique challenge to, to nail down. Accurate forecasts help growers prepare and plan for these events, and growers will definitely benefit from a localized frost forecast. So currently in Wisconsin, the forecasting system that is cranberry specific is more of a regional scale, which includes divides the whole region into four, where each region is about 4,500 square miles. So that those are big regions, and that the forecast includes a 5-day outlook with a detailed outlook for 2 upcoming nights. So with that, I just wanted to talk about growth stages and tolerance, because frost forecasting is incomplete if we don't talk about the bud stages and the corresponding tolerance. So on the left, I'm showing figures of different bud stages in the spring, white bud and bud swell in the early spring, and they progress, make their way to the more on the flowering stages. So those are some stages. And as we progress in the spring season, the threshold temperature or the trigger temperature for irrigation also increases. And that is shown in the graph on the right here, where the x-axis is in 2025, different dates. And the y-axis, we have the temperature. So the lower temperatures, lower the line on the scale here, that means it's a colder temperature. So here in maroon reddish shade, I'm showing Wisconsin, where early in the season growers manage for about 30, and it progresses as we move forward towards June, all the way to 34.5. In contrast, I thought this was a good opportunity just compare two states. So here in Massachusetts, which is denoted by this kind of purple shade, you can see we started pretty low here in terms of the management. So we're less conservative. And part of the reason is we are, of course, warmer than Wisconsin. So we start at 24 for the trigger temperature, and we move all the way to 31.5. So that was a quick way of just comparing. And how we define frost in this project is anytime we have a minimum bog temp or a minimum marsh temperature less than the threshold. For example, in this case, the threshold was 32. Say if the minimum marsh temperature was 30, we will call it a frost event, right, in marsh. And similarly, we call it bogs here. So if the temperature was lower than our corresponding threshold, we call it a frost event, right? So if this temperature was higher than this threshold line, we would not call it a frost event. So that's how we define frost in our study. So with that, the research objectives included, first of all, collecting data. And that is very crucial to even think about start developing the model, right? So we wanted to collect this data, which is free from any interference from the sprinkler irrigation for frost protection. So we need to find places where we can install the sensors and it is uninterrupted. So we work with John and Robert to identify these sites which are adjacent to the beds, and we install the sensors. And the second was to using the data that we collected, we wanted to develop and test this system, this forecasting system that can predict frost at this farm level in various counties in Wisconsin. And then finally, we wanted to compare this model to the current forecasting system in terms of how well we can determine the minimum marsh temperature as well as detect the frost events. So the field sites for this study, we had 13 cranberry marshes spread across various counties in Wisconsin, mainly central Wisconsin counties, which is kind of the hotspot of most of the cranberry acreage. Here in the map, you can see the green stars and the red crosses. These were the different sensor sites, if you will. The green were, I call it a training site. So this is basically we're training the model. In other words, it's like the model sees this field data and tries to learn the patterns with the weather. So it's model is seeing this data and then it's trying to learn. But then the data from these 3 sites that are shown in the cross is what we call it testing sites. So model has not seen this data, and whatever the model has learned on the 10 training sites, we try to evaluate that using these 3 testing sites. So that's separate, right? So we try to separate, also divide the training and testing among the regions as well for the study. And also I've shown what's called the Wisconet, which is the Wisconsin Mesonet network. We used 4 stations to forecast frost. So there were spread 1, 2, 3, and 4 stations that we used that are also shown in the map. And this image here shows one of the sensor setup, the Horto sensor setup, just adjacent to a bed in Vilas County. And sorry if I am butchering the county names here. And then so in terms of model development, we used a random forest model, which is a subtype of machine learning techniques. On the right, I'm showing a schematic of how this random forest model works. We have the data set. For example, in our case, we have the field temperature data set that we collected. It randomly samples different subsets of data and tries to apply some rules, whether for example, if the dew temperature was less than 30 or the cloud cover was whatever percent, yes and no, it branches out and get a result. And there are multiple of these trees, if you will, which makes it a forest. So it has all this network and gives us one result at the end, which is compiled here by different methods. So in terms of the model parameters, I used whatever weather data was available up till 6 p.m. And we forecasted the minimum temperature for the night using that. In specific, we used 4 Wisconet stations that were shown in the previous slide. And we also used the forecast from the high resolution rapid refresh model. This is a large weather model that is run for the entire US. And it's a regional model. It's a 3-kilometer grid, but we use this model as well to improve our forecasts. And then finally, our goal is to predict the minimum temperature and classify frost, which we do that using the 10 training sites and test using the 3 sites that I showed. So before we get into the results of the model itself, here's a snapshot of the data from one of the sensors in Wood County. So here, again, I'm showing 20 days worth of data, and this is the temperature data is recorded at like 15-minute intervals or even less than that. So you can see here, the x-axis is the date, the y-axis is the temperature, and basically the colored data series that you see here are bed temperatures, so they are affected by frost irrigation. But the black one is the research sensor, which shouldn't be affected from irrigation, right? So I'm showing 3 windows here. The left one is kind of in the maroon shade here. You can see the colored and the black kind of very well correlate with each other, and there's not much difference, which is good. The frost, management hasn't started by this point. The next window, you can see there's a clear difference, especially towards where we get to below freezing, which is this point here. You can see a clear difference between the colored and the black. So we can tell, there was irrigation happening for the colored sensors, but outside the marsh area, this sensor was not affected by that. Similarly, this here as well, where the other sensors were the minimum was 32 or something like that for them. But for the research sensor, it was about 20. So it was just a quick visual of making sure our data is working right. So with that, let's talk about how many frost events we had across the Cranberry marshes. And the color coding here is for the different counties. So if you see same color, that means those sensors were recorded at the same county. And each of these bars are for different sensors we have. right? So, and then the y-axis here is the number of frost events ranging from 0 to 25. And quick visual, the most frost events we had was for the Vilas County. So we got about 25 frost events as compared to Monroe, which was just like 4 to 6 frost events for some of those sites. And we know that, Vilas is much more north, so we expect it to be colder, which was also seen in this data. And just some information about this is the duration of this data set is April 6th to July 25th. So of course, it's different from what growers use to start monitoring for frost. So these might be more frost events than a grower might have counted because we started on April 6th. And then we again consider a frost event if the minimum marsh temperature was less than a threshold. So talking about results now, I'm presenting two versions of the random forest model, so version 1 and version 2. The first 3 metrics that I discuss is the error. Error means how far we are from the true observation, right? So how far the prediction is from the true. The first one we have is the mean bias error. So you can straight away see both values are negative. So that means we are predicting colder on average than the true value, right? So we are on the conservative side of reality. And then we have the mean absolute error and the root mean squared error. And you can see right away the version 2 random forest really reduced the root mean squared as compared to version 1, which was 6.6 root mean squared error for 1. Version 2 was like 4.4. So that was better for version 2. So the first 3 were detecting the minimum temperature. The last 5 metrics are concerning the frost events, classifying the frost events. I do want to point out this data is just for testing. So the training is excluded. So model has not seen this data. So whatever the model has learned, we're trying to, and the testing size was 247 events, out of which 43 events were frost and rest of them were not a frost event. So in terms of misses, which means there was a frost event in reality, but our model was not able to predict that. So we missed 2 with the version 1 and we missed 4 events with the version 2. So that's something, it's still not bad, but we definitely want this number to be closer to 0. We want to nail each frost event down. So that's something we want to work on. False alarms is when there's no frost in reality, but our model is saying there is frost. So that's a false alarm, right? So version 1, we had more frost events, and which kind of it checks out because it's missing less, but it's having more false alarms, right? So an idea here is we don't want to pick a model, but we can even give both models as an option. There's a more conservative approach, there's a less conservative approach, and growers can decide based on their experience with these different versions. And then in terms of correct classification, we correctly classified 213 with the version 1 out of 247. And then we classified 228 correct out of 247, which makes it an accuracy of 0.86 for version 1, 0.92 for version 2. Skill score is another way of looking at how well, what's your skill to forecast frost. Version 1, we had a scale of 0.8, 0.83 for version 2. So good results, definitely, but I feel like with more data, we can definitely do better than these, but this was good results from just this year. Just focusing on now one of the models, this is version 2, and I'm comparing the predicted temperature, which is on the x-axis here from the random forest, versus what we observed in the field on the y-axis. So if it was a perfect world scenario, the dotted 1-to-1 line, which is this dotted black line, if all these maroon points were perfectly on this 1-to-1 line, that'd be a perfect model, right? We are hands down able to nail down all the frost events and the minimum marsh temperature, but of course it's a model. So we have some dispersion. So the good news is we are able to follow the 1-to-1 line really close with very less dispersion, except for 2 or 3 outliers, which we are still working on doing better to predict some of these. These 3 points I do want to point out. We are predicting colder temperatures than reality. So it's not like, we are predicting 20 degrees warmer. So we are still on the conservative side of things, but there's room for improvement. So in conclusion, we are able to accurately predict frost forecast. Our accuracy was above 90%, scale score greater than 0.8. The top predictors that we noticed for this case study were the forecasted temperature from the large weather model that we incorporated, and also dew point from 2 of the weather stations from the Visconet network. So with that, our future work includes, we want to secure more funding to keep collecting data for another season to, build a robust model and make sure we are able to nail down each and every frost events. And definitely each season is different. So more data, the better. And I see the poll is up already. This poll is just for information purposes. We would like to know information about your frost management at your field, what your experience is like, and if you have any data that we could use in the model. So these polls are regarding that.
And Sandeep, I want to ask, do you want only Wisconsin growers to answer these polls or any growers?
Good question. I did make these specific to Wisconsin growers, but I think it's fine if other growers definitely want to answer, because I'm so sure researchers, it doesn't apply to the researchers. So and I think it's fine if other growers want to answer.
Okay,
Not
so
a big deal, yeah.
all growers are welcome to answer these, but researchers and industry kindly not.
So yeah, the future work involves, securing more funding to keep collecting data for this project. But we definitely are thankful for the current support. We want to keep continuing the model and evaluate it against the forecasting system. Our final goal is to make this into a user-friendly web application, because it doesn't do any good if it's in my computer, right? We won't have growers have access to this and make this good use of this tool, right? So with that, I would thank you all for your attention, and I know maybe we are short on time, and I can take questions whenever we have time. Thank you, Allison, and others.
Yeah, the best thing will be to, I think, have questions asked in the chat, and that way we can ask questions all together verbally at the end of Amaya's presentation. Thank you so much for that. That's really exciting work. I know a lot of growers are going to be excited to see the continuation of that. I know we've got more than, we've got nearly 40 people on the call here. I would love to hear all of your questions across color, across frost, and across the blunt-nosed leafhopper research. Until I hear others, I will ask. I had asked in the chat on Sandeep's slide for growth stages and tolerance. You had put kind of a single band for, this is the Wisconsin response temperature and this is the Massachusetts response temperature, but didn't clarify which variety that was for. Peter had replied that they do have different cultivar tolerance for each cultivar, monitoring for early blacks, for Howe's, for Benlier, and for Stevens, and the newer hybrids go along with the Benlier. But do you recall when you made that chart, which cultivar was your chosen one for Wisconsin and for Massachusetts?
Yeah, so thanks, Allison, that's a good catch. But I was thinking about putting that in, but yeah, like Peter said, it's the newer hybrid cultivars, for example, Benliers. You can apply that to Benliers, or Demore Anvils, or some of the Malacca Queens. Those would apply to the ones for Massachusetts side of things. And for Wisconsin, I got these numbers from Robert, and if he is on the call here, maybe he can clarify. So I'm not sure what varieties that particular one was. I'm assuming it was also for hybrids and some of the newer varieties, but I could be wrong on that.
Yeah, this is Robert, Sandeep, and that was for Benlier.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, apples to apples. Nice.
Fantastic. Thank you. That is just a question that I know comes up a lot. I see Amaya had raised her hand, and then I have another question in the chat. So Amaya, I'll let you jump in there.
Sure. I also have some questions about the work that Sandeep present. So did I understand this correctly? So you define a frost event based on an arbitrary threshold during that period in the spring. So at the very beginning of the spring, it doesn't matter what cultivar it is, but there's a specific threshold. And then that changes over time. So here's a couple of questions. From the practical point of view, if you're a grower and you want to use this data, first question, do you need to monitor data to input into the model to have a prediction? Or where else not all growers have, they're monitoring data outside of the beds to be able to add this input to the model, which is the input that you're adding from those horto sensors that you have. Would they use any other forecasted data? Like, could they use the WisConnect? Could they use not? The second one, do they have to tell the model and constantly be changing when those thresholds, regardless of the variety it is changing? And this is kind of complicated because my question goes here into like, how did they decide that? Because if you look at the bed, there's never one phenological stage. So they already make the decision when they're going to decide to turn on their irrigation or not. But your model is based, like this frost event are defined by this like kind of subjective, depending on the user for the frost. So I'm concerned about like, how will you actually use it if you're a grower? So those are my questions. Where would you get the temperature data, and how would you define those thresholds and how those thresholds would be changing over time? Is that something that is embedded in the model, or the growers would have to input it every time they run the model?
Awesome. Thank you, Maya, for the questions. So from what I heard, it was mainly about two things. One was what kind of parameters goes into the model, and in the future what growers would have to, manually enter the stuff in the model and get an output. That was the first one. The second one I heard was about the thresholds, whether they were arbitrary, and how would you kind of ground truth, if you will, the phenological stages that the grower are using. Let's talk about the first one, about like the data fetching, we call it. Basically, at this stage, yes, we have developed this model and I have to manually go in my computer and download this data. We don't expect this to, the growers to do this, which is why I mentioned in the future work, the web application. That web application, what it will do is it will have for growers a front end like user kind of interface, kind of like WisConnect. I think that's a great model to follow, WisConnect's network. So you go there, everything is laid out for you. You just make a few clicks, whatever location you want to select. It's just shown everything in there. That's our goal, is whatever we do in the backend is all automated. So for example, if I click on this location, for example, Plover, I go in that weather station, I'm automatically, that weather station data is being fetched automatically. The grower is just viewing and making their decisions and noting things down, right? So that's our goal, is so the data that I presented here, whether it's WisConnect or the HRR model, all that could be automated. All that data could be, we have a backend coding, if you will, like that code basically in the future will grab data based on the user, and it's gonna run the numbers, munch down numbers in the background and give a reading based on the grower. That'll be kind of the function of the web app.
Can I ask one clarification? And right now the model is being trained on that sort of data, because the WisConnect is measuring temperature data really high compared with the bed. And I know, so when you are running the model and you're creating the model right now, you're using that high temperature data from the WisConnect, right, or are you using the data that you have with your sensors? Because if you're training it with your sensors, then when the growers are going to use the WisConnect, then those two things wouldn't match.
Thanks for adding, because I was going to miss that point. Great point. So the hortosensors data that we collected in this project is just for training. What I mean by training is the model is learning what it has to predict in the future. So in the future, it's not going to be like the model is not going to expect, well, what was your marsh temperature out of today? Like for example, if I want to have a forecast, the model is not going to ask for it. Rather, in the past, it's looking at the trend. It's trying to learn, oh, if the dew point in Plover was this marsh at this location had this minimum temperature. If the weather, cloud cover, blah 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 was this, then so it's in the future, it's not going to look for or expect a marsh temperature. The additional data that I said in my future slides, that is exclusively to additionally train the model. But when we have and I do want to point out, this is not a final model. The results I presented, this is not like we are done with the model, now we're going to make it an app. This is still a work in progress. And we definitely, I believe there's a lot of room for improvement, and that improvement will come if we have more data. We have more days to look at. We have more frost events to learn from. That's our goal. And there's so many things we can even try feature wise. Like we are using Visconet. We can even use growers weather stations from Horto. We can use all sorts of other leverage all data sets that are out there. That's the beauty of random forest model. So that's that. And then the second question was regarding your threshold. So that's a great point. Usually in Massachusetts, what we do is when we go out to monitor like the phenological stage, we do notice sometimes there's variability within the same bed. We usually, I think what growers do here is they look for more advanced stage, and that's what they declare the bud stage for that bed. For example, it was a bud stell versus bud swell versus cabbage head. In the same bed, they will say cabbage head would be the bud stage because they want to be more conservative side, right? So that's what on a field level that would be that. So I'm gonna work with like stakeholders, for example, the Grower Association, to constantly keep updating the app in terms of like the threshold, so we are able to accurately determine frost. So that's number one. Secondly, we can rely on GDD as well as a backup. If I don't have the data, we can rely on GDD, be like, okay, this is the GDD for this region. Your crop will be around here. Of course, there's some, it's not going to be super perfect, but that's the second backup. Third is we're going to give growers a minimum marsh temperature, and we will say based on a threshold cabbage head, and a threshold temperature of 30, you will have a frost. If your phenological stage in your bed varies, please adjust your frost forecast accordingly based on the minimum forecasted temperature of 25 maybe, So we'll give growers that disclaimer and flexibility to decide for themselves whether a 25 minimum marsh temperature is a frost for them or not for tonight, So I hope I didn't miss anything.
No, I think that's really good. I'm gonna add a couple more questions, and then at the very end I will read out the answers to those grower polls or that you had asked, and just make sure we're hitting everything in the questions. We are over 1 o'clock, but I assume that since we still have nearly everyone is still on the call, we'll just keep running with questions until people run out of time. But knowing that we have gone over the full.
Allison.
Oh.
Casey, can I just add one thing to Sandeep's comment?
Yes, absolutely.
If a grower wants to use our model, they will need two things: an internet connection to access our website and the tolerance of their variety. That's it. That's all the grower needs to know to use our model.
Awesome. Thank you for adding that. That's the less required, the more likely we are to be able to implement it. So thank you so much for making that a light requirements. Thanks for adding that, Casey. I'm going to add a couple other things, and then we'll keep moving through the chat here. And then I think we've hit most of the frost questions live, although we got a new one just come in. All right, I want to make sure if we are dropping people at the after 1 o'clock, I do again want to thank Cesar and Sandeep and Amaya all for presenting. I'm going to share these poll results and then we'll dive into more questions. So in general, people answered for their spring frost forecasts. 50% of growers are using bed temperature sensors, 25% weather applications, and then 25% the Great Lakes Weather Service forecasting model, or the Cranberry forecast. Is that current frost warning system accurate for you? We got 55% said yes, 36% said sometimes, and 9% not applicable. There were 2 people who monitor their minimum temperature on frost nights with sensors adjacent to cranberry beds without interference from irrigation, and those 2 people were willing to share their data. So those 2 people, since this is an anonymous poll, I can't single you out and have Sandeep contact you. So if you're still on this call, please do contact Sandeep. And then the other 82% do only have temperature sensors on the beds. Finally, the auto start pumps triggered by bed temperature sensors, 45% have them on all beds, 18% have them on some beds, and 36% don't have auto start pumps triggered by bed temperature sensors. Sandeep gives his email address, sandeep.sandeep.bhatti@umass.edu. And if you're interested, you can also email me if you didn't catch that, and I'll connect you to him. So if you're willing to share data, that's always greatly beloved by people who are doing research. All right, so that was the poll results. I'm just going to jump through and make sure that we've caught all the questions. We have yep, it seems like the Sandeep's model is mainly a temperature forecast. It is also identifying instances when temperature crosses a fixed temperature threshold. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts about aspects of your model that I'm overlooking or misinterpreting. This is from another researcher.
Mm. Hey, Michael, that's a great observation. Yes, I would primarily say this is a temperature forecast, which is converted to a frost classification based on the phenology or phenological stage from the marsh. So that's pretty much the gist of it. But we use, weather data. In the future, we want to use more geographic features of the marsh to shape our temperature predictions. And one thing I missed mentioning is we are also looking at, so right now, currently we are doing, for this evening, we have a forecast for the night, but also we want to have a forecast for tomorrow night as well in the future, so that's also, that's something I'm currently working on is right now, if I get the data for 6 p.m., can I have a good enough forecast for tomorrow night? Of course, it's not going to be like tonight's forecast will, of course, be more accurate, but I think if there's a severe frost coming our way, if we can even give growers that heads up, that would be awesome. So that's another thing we're trying to look into in the future. So
awesome. Thank you.
thank you.
Another question, do producers of Massachusetts usually only rely on the frost forecast? Don't they follow their buds stage and adjust in consequence? New cultivars tend to develop more quickly. And that's a question from Quebec, and Sandeep had answered it in the chat, that in mass growers do look at their bud stages and adjust the forecast accordingly. The tolerances do change based on the cultivar. Anything to add to that? Or I think it sounds like
just so we know, there's on the UMass Cranberry Station's website, there are fact sheets for spring frost tolerance and fall frost tolerance that are, of course, applicable to Massachusetts, but maybe it's applicable to other regions too. But it's good to look at and see. And yeah, there's on those fact sheets, it clearly says which variety is what tolerance based on the bud state. So that's another resource that you can refer to, and I can put the link on the chat as well.
That'll be fantastic. And if you email it to me, since more of our growers have had to head out to their afternoon work, I'll be able to send that out.
Awesome. I'll do that.
Another addition from Peter, the phenology of the bud is an integral part of the model as it affects tolerance. So very as it should be. Amaya asks, for growers that already have bed temperature monitoring sensors, how would your model provide more information?
For the growers that already have bed temperatures. Yep. So for growers who are already monitoring bed temperatures, so if I have, for example, if a bed temperature at our research site here, I can know like in the evening, yeah, my bed temperature is reporting like 40, but at that time in the evening, I cannot, there's no way for you just using those bed temperature sensors. I can be like, oh yeah, at the night it'll be like 20 based on if it's 40 now, so that the model gives growers that any additional information, not just the present, but in the future. So that's why it's a forecast. It's not just so that's what the difference is. It's not just it's present, it's in the future.
And Peter adds another comment about wanting to check whether altitude contributes to frost dynamics, which could be an interesting additional wrinkle.
Yep,
Um,
definitely.
It looks like questions are slowing down, but to give people just one more opportunity to ask questions if they have any, I will read out our upcoming events. So the next brown bag is December's brown bag, Friday, December 19th, from noon to 1 Central. That'll feature Brad Bowling of UW Food Scientist on some cranberry-based gums, Virginia Stockwell of Oregon Plant Pathology on stem gall, and Hannah Gaines Day with the UW pollinator group, and she would be talking about weeby as well as where pollinators have been foraging. Cranberry School, of course, is going to be Wednesday and Thursday, January 14th and 15th. And watch for more information from Anne coming to you for that. One thing to note is that they do have the early bird pricing ends on December 1st. I know that's earlier than it maybe has been in the past, so be aware if you want the early bird pricing, that helps them lock in food prices at the most affordable rate. So sign up for Cranberry School by December 1. And then our nutrient management plan training is going to be Tuesday, February 3rd at the Millston Cranberry Innovation Center, formerly known as Wisconsin Cranberry Research Station. And then Sandeep sent out a couple of fact sheets. There's umass.edu/agriculture-food-environment/cranberry/fact-sheets. And then also that same UMass agriculture, food, environment, cranberry/fact sheets, and then spring frost tolerances of cranberry buds 2019. And I will be able to send those out to people who are curious as well. I do appreciate everyone's patience for rolling with us all the way to 20 minutes after the hour, but I know that we had really good, really relevant topics that everyone was excited to learn more about. So I want to give a huge thank you to Cesar and to Sandeep and to Amaya. Thank you all so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And a lot of the growers are putting a thank you in the chat as well.